Hi, I'm Doug Padgett with Vote Common Good. At Vote Common Good, we encourage people of faith to bring about a change on Election Day by making the common good their voting criteria, and by deepening into faith, hope, and love to stop the re-election of Donald Trump. We've been talking with faith voters all across the country who did vote for Donald Trump in 2016, but won't be voting for him in 2020. Here are a few of their stories. You can hear their entire interviews and share your story at votecommongood.com.
4 years ago, and even now a little bit, definitely am apolitical. And so there's so many other things that I am passionate about that, in full honesty and disclosure, I have stuck my head in the sand when it comes to politics. And I am humiliated to say this out loud, but that's part of my gift to the world, is being honest, that I have abdicated my thinking when it comes to politics to the people around me. With 4 kids, and we were in trauma, and then getting the degrees, all the things that I was quote unquote on the trajectory to be an expert of or busy with, I just didn't have the time and the wherewithal to add politics into it. And so in full honesty, 4 years ago, I just abdicated my thinking and I let others do the thinking for me. During that race in 2016, I very much felt like I had the choice to choose between 2 cancers. And even though I'm a feminist and I would have loved to have a female president, but I very much didn't align with a bunch of what Hillary stood for and what her politics were, the little that I knew of them. And I just had this sense of just distrust, like I just didn't trust her. And I also loathed and didn't trust Donald Trump. And so at the election at 2016, I felt like my choice was, which kind of cancer do you want to live with? Because you got to pick one. And so I broke it down to feeling like I had the choice between 2 different regimes. I felt like the cancer is, I despised both political characters, and I had very little respect for both of them as humans, and very little respect for both of them as leaders. And so I felt like I was choosing between a socialist regime and a capitalistic regime. And so for me, and similar, you heard Sam talk about, we very much believe in the rhythm of balance. I appreciate our checks and balance systems in the United States. And so because we had 8 years of Obama, and although I very much appreciated Obama's presidency, I am so grateful to have a person of color in that office. And I was really grateful for how he carried himself. So I have a lot of respect and honor for Obama. But I did feel like we were moving towards a socialistic society. And from what I know of history, that has yet to go well. And for the record, capitalism hasn't gone that well either. And so it was like, I have these 2 regimes I have to choose from. Which am I going to choose, for the socialist regime or the capitalistic regime? And I have to pick which kind of cancer I want to have to go with that. And so I picked the Trump kind of cancer in hopes that the check of a capitalistic president would maybe help our country balance back out a little bit more. And I was so wrong. I picked the wrong cancer. In hindsight, especially, even the more I learned about Hillary, I probably would have been much more in alignment with her politics in hindsight. And I'm really sad that I abdicated my thinking. I'm really sad that I let, as you know, in Arizona, most of my family and friends are both fundamental Christians and deeply conservative. And so, like my husband, I have been a Republican my whole life. And it was, what I mean by abdicating my thinking is I would just vote down the party line because that was easier for me. And I think you mentioned this before too, right? Like you talk about like, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to pick Republican.
It's part of the reason there's political parties, right? They're meant to serve that as a surrogate for, if you don't know the person,
yes,
pick the party. That's why we tend to have them and people fit into them. So it's good to not blame someone for saying, I vote down the party line. That's why the parties, that's one of the services the parties provide.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I had, but I think for me, the waking up process has been really pivotal. And so to be really honest, as I have woken up to white privilege, my own white privilege, anti-racism, the more work I do around anti-racism, the more I deeply regret and am saddened by the choice I made 4 years ago, and I would never make that choice again. I heard you ask Sam about what was that one moment that happened that you knew, oh my God, I made the wrong choice. Like, oh my gosh, this cannot happen. And for Sam, it was a series of events. And I think for me, that's also true. But really in 2018, when Trump came out calling countries shitholes, I lost it. I mean, I lost my shit on that, going, you cannot speak of other people. I have an incredible, unquenchable, deep love for all humankind. And if I had been more awake and more aware, I could have seen what the rest of people saw all along, that man loathes humanity. But that was one of those in my face moments where I couldn't abdicate my thinking any longer, and I couldn't pretend. It was when I knew this cancer was going to kill us as a country and as a globe. And you cannot have somebody in office that has a genuine loathing for humankind. And that honestly, I'm going to get teary, but it grieves my heart. Like I just cannot with that. And it was, the signs were there all the time. So, right. So it's anyone watching this is like, you idiot, you could have figured out that he loathes humankind well before 2018. And that is totally true. And, but I think like any waking up process, you're blind until you aren't, right? Like I really appreciate, you said something funny today or during our class, and I really loved it, that you're asleep until the alarm goes off, right? Like you're asleep until the alarm clock goes off. And I think when it comes to politics, I chose to stay asleep. Yeah. And the alarm clock went off, and I woke up and joined the rest of, the rest of what you good people are doing. And I can very clearly see the error of my ways in what I had chosen to vote for, even though I don't necessarily agree with Hillary's politics. I don't think that she has a loathing for humankind. So had I had it to do over again, I would have done it different. But again, hindsight 2020, I get to do better now. And I love that. Like once you wake up and you can't change what you don't see. And now that I can clearly see, I get to participate in the better world. And like you said, the more beautiful world that my heart knows is possible. And this is not it.
Yeah. So and it's easy for people to say that people who are apolitical or they don't think about politics, or it's not how they order their world, and they're going to respond to political choices rather than to be proactive in their political opinions. It's easy to say that those people don't care and you're operating in privilege and all. But do you see yourself? And I'm not suggesting that's the case. I think it's an option many people have to take, right?
Right.
Do you now think of yourself as still apolitical but more aware, or are you thinking of yourself now as, oh, my alarm went off, I've woken up to issues that I think I'm seeing the implications of these issues. Now I need to not be apolitical? Or did you see being apolitical as still the way you want to be, but you want to be more attuned to the issues that politics address?
No, that's a great question. No, the alarm clock went off, and especially as my faith has shifted, I now can see, just like everything is spiritual, everything's political, right? And so I can see how deeply political the message of Jesus is, and how blind I was to it before. So for example, I'm a post-evangelical or a recovering evangelical or a recovering fundamentalist, because I'm still very evangelical with a lowercase e. But I'm no longer, I have moved out of the fundamental Christianity. And so when I was in that silo, it was all about personal salvation, right? And honestly, it was all about me. And so as my gospel has shifted to the we, so has my politics. And the only reason, and you all have said this over and over again, and I just didn't get it until the last 4 years. The only reason I had the luxury of being apolitical is because the system worked for me. And so that waking up to that my own privilege allowed me to be apolitical. And if I truly am who I say I am, if I truly have an unquenchable love for all humankind, I do not have the luxury to be apolitical any longer. That if I truly believe that sozo or salvation means wholeness, and it not only means my own working out my own wholeness, but if this means we the collective nation, if I'm for wholeness for all humankind, I do not get to be apolitical any longer. And so I'm so sad. Now I have to get in the political game. And I'm so ignorant when it comes to that. So I have a lot of work to do. And it's worth doing. So if I'm committed to humankind, and if I'm committed to anti-racism work, and if I'm committed to social justice and social good for all humankind, I have to get in the politics game. At least insofar as where I'm not abdicating my thinking any longer, and I don't have the luxury of voting down a party line. Like my husband, we both switched. We turned in our Republican card, so now I'm an independent, which makes me an independent thinker, which means I actually have to think for myself, which I love to do in every other area. It's just this one area. Gosh, I got lazy, and I got lazy because I was privileged and the system worked for me. And the more I wake up to who I truly am, and the more I operate and live in my true self, the more committed I am to the wholeness of all humankind.
Well, yeah, Shaleen, I think this is a really important part of the whole conversation, because there's a kind of politics which is move your base and fight for 50% plus one. Right? All you have to win by is one more vote than the other person, and the other than 49% of people. You don't have to think about them. You
Right.
don't have to consider them. And then there's a kind of politics which says you, as anybody who's a representative, whether that's at the state level or the county level or the federal level, their constituents are all the people that live in their area that they represent.
Right.
And that's a different approach. The kind of sleepwalking through life can apply to all kinds of political opinions, right? There's people who are extremely progressive Democrats and would say, like, no, I don't consider these issues. I made a choice a while ago. I'm sticking with the Democrats. That's that. And Republicans do the same. And what you're suggesting, and that's what we suggest at Vote Common Good, is that you make the common good, our language, to be your voting criteria, and you consistently run your political affiliations, associations, and votes through a criteria that says, is this about the common good? Now,
Right.
No one can do that every single day on every issue, every time you have to vote, because a lot of things you don't even know enough about. So you have to borrow from the system to tell you, generally speaking, what area you're going to be in. But it really is asking all of us, like your story is asking all of us to pay a bit more attention, and that there's a wake up happening. Do you see that happening with other friends of yours? Is what's happened to you? Do you feel like you're one of the rare ones that woke up from 2016 and are not going to be voting for Trump again in 2020? Or do you see that happening among friends and others?
No, I definitely see it happening among friends and others. Now, there are, for sure, what's interesting, I would say, in my world, the older demographic that I'm surrounded by, they are deeply committed to the party. And so there's no movement from a certain age group up that I'm seeing. But I would say for most of my peers, a lot of us are waking up, and a lot of us are going, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? We got to do better, and we got to do different. And I do think, like, one of the things I would really appreciate, and this is a lot of why I appreciate Vote Common Good, is this idea with actually Jamie, Dr. Clark Souls. She did a great job at giving us this word, designated readers. And what I have loved about, like, in the theological world, I see so many people abdicating their theological thinking and handing it over to the institution. And the religious institutions are not serving us well. And what I like is this idea of having a designated reader that can help you. Like, you can't be an expert on everything, right? But I see myself as a designated reader in the theological world. Like, my greatest passion is to help people think for themselves theologically. Yeah. And it was so funny how blind I was, where I couldn't do that politically. Like, I'm super passionate about it in the theological world, and I was so blind to it in the political world. And so my encouragement to myself is to go, and the people around me, you don't have to be an expert on politics. But what I do need to look for is, I want to look for designated readers that can help me synthesize and distill all the information out there. And there's a difference between a designated reader telling you what to think and a designated reader helping you get the information so you can think for yourself. And so now I'm looking for designated readers in the political realm to help me synthesize and distill and to bring down all of the politics to a level that I can understand it. And then I can make my own choices from there. And so my hope would be that more people can find out who are your designated readers, who do you trust, and who is not telling you what to think, but who's teaching you how to think. I am so passionate about that in theology, and I am starting to wake up and get equally passionate about that in politics.
Shaleen, thank you so much. Thanks for your openness, articulating, and for your story.
Thank you.